All right, everyone, welcome back to another edition of the 86 Forever preseason roundtable. This time we're talking over-unders. This has been a classic on our page for a lot of years going back, and we've got some really interesting ones this year. I did my best to make it as challenging as possible. We're stretching the limits of what we can do. So obviously, last year was not a full season, so we don't have that same head-to-head data that you'd normally have from year to year. So had to get a little creative, had to do a little bit of math, but I think it's going to be good. And we're going to start with the big one, I guess, the most important one in a lot of ways, which is wins. The Vancouver Whitecaps, they've had 9 or less wins each of their last 3 years. So with that in mind, given the improvements we've seen, over or under 10 wins in 2021 for the Vancouver Whitecaps. Caleb, why don't you start us off?
Sure. Well, it's going to kind of depend on if they can score enough goals.
Which
Uh,
we'll get to.
I'm sure, yes, we'll get to, but I mean, you kind of can't talk about wins without talking about goals for and against. I did some sort of back of the napkin math, which I won't bore the listeners with, but basically, I figure they're going to be like most of their games are going to be pretty like low event as the roster is currently constructed on this March 20th, 2021, 10 o'clock in the morning. Obviously, that might change. And I go through and I look at the past standings and I look at teams that scored about the number of goals that I figure they're going to score. And the only way that they got over 10 wins was if their defense was like extremely like rock solid. And I can see a path to their defense being that good, but I think that might be a little stretching your credulity. It might be a little overly optimistic to think they're that good. So I am afraid. I think right now I have to take the under.
Well, I think part of what makes this difficult is, at least at the beginning of the year, there are going to be stretches of the year where they're just not going to have big chunks of their starting 11 for international duty. And it's like, especially at the beginning of the year, are they going to be able to get themselves out of a hole that they potentially dig themselves in? I'm kind of this opinion that they're going to fall somewhere between the 9-win mark and the 13 or 14 wins that you usually need to qualify for the 6th seed in the playoffs. So I'm thinking over, but not by all that much unless they really are able to overperform when they are without some of their key guys who are away with the Canadian national team.
I'd say to add on to that, you also got to keep in mind that we are playing in Utah as well, right? So there's that whole away from home aspect that we need to deal with, along with losing players. Just for the sake of differences, I'm going to say they're going to get exactly 9 wins, not over, not under. But I think we just got to see how they start the season off because that could like define the rest of how they finish it.
I think I'm kind of in the same boat as Luis. I'm looking at it less from a statistical standpoint as Caleb is, but at the same time, my gut's telling me that like what Caleb is saying is 100% right. It's just like, I don't know if they're going to have the defense to sustain or to provide enough of a sponge for the offense to soak up like whatever it is they can or cannot do. I can totally see them just getting 10, like sitting right in like 13th or something like that. Just not super far up the table, not going to qualify for the playoffs. They're going to get their 10 wins. They're going to have to find a way to actually get points that aren't losses. Just turn like losses into draws somehow. Like that's how they're probably going to climb the table a little bit, avoiding giving up points as opposed to just winning them outright.
Yeah, I think that kind of leads right into what I'm thinking. And this leads into our next question as well. 0 draws last year. I feel like this year maybe we get to push the other way, and it's just like a massive amount of draws. So I feel like they could be a more competitive team, but could end up with the same amount of wins or even a little bit less. So I think I'm sitting right in there with Luis and Ian. It's going to be that 9-10 win mark. So I'm kind of calling a push on this one. I think they finish with right on 10 wins and, again, in the mix for the playoff hunt, but maybe don't quite get there in the end. That's kind of where I see this one going. But it's a lot can change, as Caleb kind of outlined. You know, if they're able to make a big addition, things could move pretty quick. But as the team sits right now, I think that 9-10 win mark is about what we all expect.
Plus, I think in years past, we've all suffered from being part of the unofficial members of the Optimist Union. I don't want to go way beyond what we're setting the bar at, because usually we just, end up with air on our face at the end of the season. So I'm like, no, this is the year where I'm underselling it. I'm staying below our blog expectations.
Well, part of the other problem in making these predictions is we've had some really exciting additions in the offseason, as we got into in episodes prior, but we really have no idea what this is going to look like as a collective unit on the pitch. We don't really know formation. We don't really know, we obviously don't know when a number 10 is coming, if a number 10 is coming. And we don't really know we have a rough idea of style of play, but with these new impact players, it's kind of unclear how it's all going to translate, because we haven't had friendlies. We haven't had kind of the bits and pieces and scraps of information that we use as fodder for making these picks. So absent that, it's kind of hard to get too optimistic because of what we've seen the last two seasons to get at Ian's point.
All right, well, moving on to our next over-under, and one that I kind of hinted at really quick. No draws for the Whitecaps in 2020. A weird, wacky record for a weird, wacky year. But Caleb brought this up right before we started, actually, and I think it's a really good one. How long will the Whitecaps go in 2021 before they draw their first match? The over-under for this one is 5, so more or less than 5 matches before they record their first draw in 2021.
I think I'm going to go under, but I mean, I'm not basing that on anything really.
This one's a real who can say.
Yeah, I mean, we only know 2 of the games that they're playing right now, but if I had to give this the veneer of having so that I've actually thought about this a bit, I'd say they're going to be pretty depleted to start the season. Toronto is one of their first 2 games. They've had, their team is just riddled with COVID apparently. And they're going to have to play some Champions League games. There might be some rotation. I think that game has draw written all over it. So I'm predicting that game, which I think is the second game, will be the first draw of the season.
Not to mention that game is taking place in Florida as well. So, it's got that lovely cross-continent travel to it. I mean, that's just bunker defense and hope for the best.
Yeah, I mean, especially with the depleted, as Kayla mentioned, the depleted roster, that just screams that we're going to put 10 men behind the ball and try and grind out a point somewhere in the first couple games. Especially, I mean, against Portland, I mean, I could see him just bunkering the whole game and not really trying at all to play for anything but a draw. So setting aside just the statistical anomaly that it doesn't seem likely to repeat itself, I think they're going to just be looking for results and everything and get them early in the season.
I think I'd go around the same lines, but I want to be optimistic and say that they're going to not try to bunker down and just try to give it their all, even with their missing personnel, which I do think is something that we really need to look into as well, because there's so many competitions going on with qualifiers and Gold Cup and the Olympics as well, so that could affect them. And the optimist in me wants to say that it'll be until I don't know, August maybe, when they get their first draw, and then we could set a record maybe. So I'll go over for this one.
I don't think I actually gave a number. I'm just gonna from not knowing the schedule. You know what? They're gonna drop Portland. They're just gonna be done with it right away. Just forget it. Something's gonna happen, and it's gonna be either this boring ass game where nothing happens, or it's gonna be this 3-3 heart stopper. Someone on Portland scores in the 94th minute and just turns a win into a draw, and we're okay, well, that just happened, and then streak's over. That's it.
This one really feels like it goes one of 2 ways, right? Because everything's lining up for one of these opening matchups to be a low event 0-0 or 1-1 kind of draw, but I just feel with all the unknowns, all the chaos going on, that maybe we get some wide open matches or stuff that at least breaks open at some point. And so just to kind of go go against what we're expecting, to defy convention, I'm going to say that they keep riding the streak and that they make it to 6 or 7 matches before they get a draw. All right, well, that takes us to over-under number 3, and that is goals for. Last year, we're projecting this based on what a full season would have looked like. The Whitecaps would have been on pace for 40 goals for last year. What I'm setting the over-under at for 2021 is 5 goals more than that. Over or under 45 goals for in 2021.
Well, if they sign a DP number 10, then this is the biggest slam dunk over in history. If they don't, I reckon they're going to be somewhere in the low 40s. It kind of depends. So I'll stick with the under for now. I retain the right to change that if things change.
I want to say that they're going to score maybe like 15 to 17 goals before that DP comes in the summer, and then it's going to speed up. But I'm going to be a pessimist and say under.
I think I've got to agree with that. Just, me and Luis, we got to stay in that 9-10 win zone. Unfortunately, can't contradict ourselves, right? So it's going to be close to 45. But again, going back to Caleb's point about the wins losses at the very beginning, like it may not make as much a difference if the defense actually holds up pretty well. So I mean, they could do well by only scoring like 44 goals if they're only conceding 40, right? For argument's sake. But generally speaking, they'll get close to 45. I think they'll fall just a little bit short.
I'm going to take the push and go right at 45 because, I mean, as we alluded to, that seems to be about right. And just the uncertainty, they're not going to score very many goals early on. I mean, they're not going to have their new shiny attacking or distributing pieces on the pitch because of visa hangups or what have you, quarantining for several weeks into the season. And I'm going to believe, I'm operating on the assumption we're not getting a number 10 so that when that happens, I can be happy and be proven wrong. And absent that, I mean, I think it's going to they're going to gel at some point, but they're not going to really get too far over that mark, especially early in the year when who knows what that attack is going to look like, if we're even going to try an attack.
Yeah, I think that you guys are all pretty on the money in terms of those evaluations. And I guess I'm going to echo what Ian said and what most of you guys have said. I'm looking at between 40 and 45 goals for. So I think they're on the underside. If you had, even absent the attacking midfielder, if you had Alexandra, Gaspar, all these guys at full fitness to start the year, then I think I'd take the over 45 pretty easily. But just with those early struggles, the adjustment period, everything that's going on, it feels like they're going to be a little on the light side of that.